gotta do like a flashback. Previously on It's Probably Not Aliens. And then just like a bunch of lines that are sort of like out of context, but they tell a whole story.
Hancock.
Yeah. What are our best bits from that episode that we did last week?
A lot of things happened in the 7 days between the last time we recorded.
I don't remember anything except Hancock.
Yeah, Hancock was pretty good. Hancock was a powerful emotion.
It sure was. I'm living on the high of Hancock right now.
Listen, I between the time we recorded Graham Hancock Part 1 and Hancock Part 2, I have released a video that I have compared to passing a kidney stone. It was so long and took so much work that I basically...
We've been doing stuff.
There was a point where I was like, oh, there's a lot of stuff that I just did not do for weeks.
Yeah, Tristan's been doing more than me. I've been just laying around until Tristan calls me on Zoom again to record a podcast.
Well,
that's not true.
Yeah, you are a very busy boy.
I am a busy boy. But last time we were talking about Graham Hancock's books. Do we have more books?
We do have more books. So last time, let's do a quick recap for anybody. If, by the way, this is a podcast called It's Probably Not Aliens.
Yes.
Where we debunk ancient astronaut, ancient apocalypse, pseudo-history, pseudo-archaeology. Typically, we're going through ancient aliens, but today we're going to talk about a big crank in the ancient, like the Atlantis pseudo-archaeology theory.
Yeah.
The person named Graham Hancock, who was the prime host, and his ideas basically informed the entirety of the Netflix documentary series,
quote unquote documentary series,
Ancient Apocalypse, which I recently somehow made a 2-hour YouTube video responding to. And as sort of a crossover, I decided that I wanted to get the rest of my Hancock energy out of me by doing an entire 2 episodes. So that means that by the time this is over, there's going to be approximately like 4 hours of content of just me getting mad at Graham Hancock.
So that's what we're doing. And who is that person who's getting mad at Graham Hancock?
Why, that's Tristan Johnson. Ooh.
I introduced you this time.
Jinx, you owe me a Coke. Yeah, my name is Tristan Johnson. I feel like I'm knowing less the longer I'm doing this 2-parter. But but I am luckily being kept sane by my anchor, Scott Nicewander.
Yes, hello. It is me, Scott Nicewander. I am the other host of this podcast, and I know nothing. Tristan says he's knowing less as time goes on. If that was true about me, my knowledge would be inverted. I would know less than nothing. I would know negative nothing.
But what if it's like I know this is not a true story, internet, so don't at me.
Okay.
But maybe you'll pull a Gandhi civilization integer overflow and instead become the most intelligent person who's ever lived.
Whoa. You think that's possible?
I mean, I don't know how intelligence works, but my guess is yes. And
my big brain's gonna leak out of me like I'm a Play-Doh man with hair that squishes out. That's why all my hair's gone. It's because I'm making room for my brain.
Yeah, you're gonna be like one of those memes where the people have the gigantic brains that are like an entire elephant that they're riding on top of.
But that hasn't happened yet. I still know nothing. And we're gonna continue talking about Hancock today.
Yeah, so Hancock, as we kind of talked about, was a journalist from the UK who then decided to veer into crankery by trying to make the claim that all of civilization, especially all of the great feats of engineering done by non-whites, were all actually done by an ancient Atlantis civilization called Atlantis that was full of extremely white people who bestowed their gift of knowing how to move big rock to civilizations across the world.
That's awesome. Thanks, white people.
And that they existed during the last ice age, and that they were basically wiped out in the Younger Dryas period, which is this period where the Earth... It was the period before the end of the ice age where things got really cold for a while, and then it started to pick up.
Do you think... I don't even think the idea of Atlantis people being white was even true for the movie, the cartoon movie Atlantis, right? I don't think so.
I haven't seen it.
Okay. It's got... Everyone in it is hot, and they're all cartoon characters, I understand, but they are lines that are drawn to be hot. Milo is hot is what I'm saying. Milo, the main character, is a good-looking man. Anyway, this got into a weird territory that we're in right now. Let's move on, please.
So then he has then since written a bunch of books that are either rehashes of racist 19th century stuff about Atlantis, or trying to claim things like the Sphinx is super old, or that there's an ancient civilization on Mars, or any list of like all these sorts of things. And we stopped at a certain point in his career when we start getting into a book called Supernatural: Meeting with the Ancient Teachers of Mankind. And that's where we're going to start today.
So he's going to have he's going to have a little conference. He's going to call them into the conference room and be like, hey guys, we got to talk. It's about your performance recently, and we just don't have the budget right now, and COVID hit us with some tough times, and if you can clear out your desk by the end of the day, that'd be great.
I'm gonna let you keep digging this.
He called the ancient teachers of mankind in at 4:55 p.m. on a Friday, and they knew immediately what was happening.
I've worked in media relations. I know about garbage day. So I'll tell you though, the ancient teachers of mankind are not people. Because this is another part about Graham Hancock's body of work that I intentionally saved for part 2. So the ancient teacher of mankind are hallucinogenic drugs.
Cool.
Graham has basically somebody reviewed this book, Supernatural, by saying that our boy Graham here has decided Graham Hawk.
Wow, we just keep changing it.
Our boy Graham here decided that eating a shit ton of mushrooms is the same thing as credibility. The subsequent abuse and mutilation of the scientific method should qualify as a war crime.
Oh my God.
So basically, if you think that a lot of his theories about the origins of humanity have to do with sound like he's on drugs, it's because he was. Yeah, so basically the hypothesis behind Supernatural is that pretty much all of the things that we know about drugs, because if we go into a hallucinogenic trance, it tunes us into an alternate dimension full of energy beings.
Whoa.
Who we confuse to be aliens, gods, or fairies, or things like that.
Okay, so there aren't aliens. There are energy beings that we confuse to be aliens.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And that they want to mate with us so that their offspring can find expression in the material realm.
Okay. I have a lot of questions about what you just said.
Okay.
I have a lot of questions. So they want to mate with us so that their offspring can do what again?
Basically exist on the material plane.
Okay. So
because they're from like a dream dimension that you can only access by getting high as hell.
Okay. And then, so that means our parts are compatible, just to put it that way.
Yeah.
And are we impregnating them? Are they impregnating us? Is it both ways? Would you know if you were giving birth to an energy baby?
Good question. If this book was still in print, I would be able to answer for you.
Cool.
There is one quote I do have from another review that I think perfectly encapsulates the standard of evidence done in this book, which is that exactly 2 unnamed scientists, who I didn't bribe, stated that there's insufficient research in neuroscience to conclusively state that the commonalities in these experiences can be ascribed to shared human natural blueprint. Therefore, we must conclude that my fucking lunatic ramblings are the only reasonable explanation. Citation: I took acid 12 different times.
So this is, and we were mentioning this and teasing this in the last episode, but this is definitely the part of Graham Cox's career where he gets real into drugs.
Yeah, and
starts writing stuff.
I'm gonna just put it out here that I have no issues with people enjoying altered states of consciousness. If you like to do hallucinogens, that's great. I've been told that, it's actually very therapeutic, and there's a lot of investigation into using it for PTSD, for depression in ways that are really, really, really effective. And so I don't want to besmirch what can be a very useful tool for people to either see the world in a different way or to legitimately go through psychotherapy. therapy. But I will say that the general theory, and this isn't the first person I've heard talk about this, where taking hallucinogenic drugs, like there's this whole theory by people who are really into hallucinogens that there's a shared experience and that people who take hallucinogens see the same things, and that this is signs that somehow hallucinogens are having you tap into another universe or seeing things from another dimension or some sort of like extra level of something. There's been talk about things like machine elves, and I feel like this could be a very interesting episode of an educational podcast. That's probably not this one.
I mean, I'm hanging on.
Maybe like supernatural hallucinogenic claims might be an interesting podcast episode if we run out of cranks.
I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, there are a lot of cranks out there. But Graham Hancock is part of this movement, and I think it does belie that like a lot of Graham Hancock's work has a different standard of evidence. Like, how can you get to all these things? And it's because Graham Hancock's beliefs sort of have he has a standard of evidence that comes more intuitively, and that his goals are more metaphysical than they are scientific. And so I mentioned this a lot in the video that I made about it, but he has a lot of decisions that he makes about the nature of human history that come from his vibes about things. Like, he's just like, this is what...
He's a very vibey guy.
Yeah, like he'll be like there's a lot of statements in Ancient Apocalypse specifically where he's like, archaeologists have said this for centuries, but I don't know if I believe that. Citation?
It doesn't sit right with me.
I have this other belief. It makes no sense, but I don't know. It makes more sense to me.
It's just kind of cooler to me to think about this other thing.
So Graham Hancock is in that realm of taking dreams and visions and revelations and stuff as evidence.
Horoscopes.
And one of the things that I thought that made something like Ancient Apocalypse so destructive is that despite the fact that he has this very like esoteric, whimsical like background, he is selling this documentary as if he is just skeptical of the science, and he has his own very logical reasons for doing so that are based on reasoning and basically like a grand conspiracy on behalf of archaeology to keep the field boring for some reason. He never really explains why the grand conspiracy of archaeologists are working to undermine him, but that's a different thing.
Classic Leo. I looked it up, his birthday. If we're talking about stars and vibes and things, I was like, I'm going to get on the horoscope thing. Classic Leo. But I also don't know what Leos do. Anytime I just learn what anyone's sign is, I'll just be like, ha, classic Pisces. But I don't know what I don't know what those mean.
Me neither. I think I'm supposed to be a loner who is very cool and detached and artistic.
Yeah, that describes you to a T. Wow, horoscopes are pretty good, actually. Now that I think about
Everyone who knows me, that I am cool and distant and artistic.
Yeah. What do Leos do? I want to look it up. Leos are specifically on his birthday, because I guess you have different personality depending on the exact day you were born. It's almost like people are different. Weird. He's a great achiever. I guess that's true. He did achieve stuff, right?
Somehow I imagine his bank account looks a lot better than either of ours.
He doesn't take time to rest.
Or research.
Or research. It does say negative traits are lack malleability and find it hard to adapt. But I don't know if that's true, since all he does is take things and bend them to sort of fit what he thinks. But I guess that is lack of malleability on his part. He's bending everything else to fit his vibes.
There you go. So that was that. And then he...
Thank you for indulging me.
He took a little bit... and he also, just like sort of jumping ahead a little bit, he also, to this extent, made a TED Talk on TEDx in 2013 called The War on Consciousness. And The War on Consciousness is basically a TED Talk promoting the use of ayahuasca, which is sort of psychedelic tea that is important in a lot of spiritual indigenous ceremonies.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that like this travel journalist in the 1950s was introduced to the ayahuasca ceremony by like a bunch of indigenous people. And then like now a bunch of like white people go down there and try to take their own ayahuasca journeys. And it's like sort of like poisoned the like the person who did it to the guy who wrote the Time magazine. I think it was Time magazine. magazine article about it. She was like ostracized by her like local community, and like, yeah, there's some really complex like colonialist overtones when it comes to white people taking ayahuasca, but that's a different conversation.
You've ruined the thing that made it special.
Mm-hmm.
Come on, white people.
We never do that.
Never once. This is the first time.
Interestingly enough, the next thing that he does is he decides to take a veering out of writing what he calls nonfiction and starts writing a series of fantasy novels.
As I said last time, probably should have started with the fantasy novels.
Yeah.
Probably should have only done the fantasy novels.
Mm-hmm. So he wrote a book called Entangled, The Eater of Souls.
All right.
A book he claims he spent decades researching and writing, and uses all of his knowledge to make a quote, this is from their jacket copy, to propel a fantasy adventure like nothing else preceding it. Oh. It's a time-slip novel alternating between present-day California, Brazil, and prehistoric Spain with two teenage female protagonists who must come together to avert an incredibly bloodthirsty takeover of the human race.
Okay, fun.
So the book is about an evil master magician named Sulpa who is on the loose and determined to destroy humanity, and is opposed by a teenager by the name of Leonie who lives in LA, and Ria, a young woman who lives in Stone Age Spain, where the two meet in a parallel dimension outside the flow of time and try to stop Sulpa's deadly materialization in the material world. This book was indeed inspired by his drug trips and his sort of idea of extra-dimensional creatures trying to come into our dimension. And that is the extent of what I know about the book, but I have seen from reviews that it is apparently notable for having extremely unrealistic female protagonists and is also gratuitously violent.
I've been slipping into BookTube recently. Like, YouTube's been recommending me a lot of booktubers, and so they just talk about books that I've never heard of and never read, and they're all bad. And that describes like a lot of stuff. Specifically, any male author, I feel, is like unrealistic female protagonists. It's like, yeah, bud, obviously.
Yeah. So anyways, so then he wrote that novel. Then he wrote another series of novels, which I think there are like 4 of these in the series now, which is a series called War God, which is a story of, it's another fantasy series that takes place during the conquest of Mexico by the Spanish conquistadores.
Okay.
So basically, dark powers that work behind the scenes of history show their hand as the prophecy of the return of Quetzalcoatl is fulfilled with the arrival of Cortez. The Aztec ruler Moctezuma fights to maintain the demands of the war god Huitzilopochtli for human sacrifice. The Spanish Inquisition is planning an even greater bloodletting.
Man, between that and the TEDx talk about the war on consciousness, he's in his war era. Remember last time we were talking about he was in his quest era? Every title of everything was like quest for something, quest for this, quest for that. Now we're in war god, war on consciousness. He's in his war. He's done exploring. He's done questing. He's out for blood now.
Yeah, fun. So the book has been described as badly written, simplistic, and needlessly gory.
Wow, again, huh?
Yeah. And apparently and also one review said, hey, this is great and all, like when talking about the history of the conquest of Mexico, saying, hey, this is great and all, but it could really use more white male perspective. So basically they're saying...
Also, hold on, what do you mean needlessly gory? The book is called War God. What do you expect? There's only one thing that the war god can do.
Yeah. One of the things that this book is both praised and criticized for, depending upon what side of the culture war you're on, is its depiction of the indigenous Nahua people of central Mexico. Specifically about how much it seems to lean into the gruesomeness of the practice of human sacrifice that they did, especially to the war god Huitzilopochtli, which is what the reference is there.
I see.
And then apparently there is an afterword in the first novel where Hancock says that he describes other historians of this period as, quote, politically correct. So he goes into the basically he's saying that historians who write about the Aztecs and try to complexify and talk a little bit more with nuance about the practice of human sacrifice, they're doing political correctness.
Oh, I see. And he's like, I want to talk about all the blood and the gore and
in doing so wants to basically both sides, the Spanish and the Mexicans, in the conquest of Mexico. Mexico. So,
I see.
So as the book goes, the Spanish are brutal, greedy colonizers, but look at how horrible the Mexica were for carving out the hearts of innocent victims for their hummingbird to the left of the sun god. And I'm like, oh, man, every part of me that loves studying like Mexica, like their mythology and their spirituality is just like in pain because so there's some stuff about Mexica spirituality that, yes, Mexica spirituality did have a heavy influence or did have heavy use of human sacrifice. There's also a lot of evidence that it was played up a lot so that it was part of sort of the geopolitical era, like that the people from Tenochtitlan, which was the Aztec capital, would use human sacrifice because Huitzilopochtli, the war god, did require sacrifices and required sacrifices that came from war. And so that meant that the entirety of because of human sacrifice, warfare in Mexico was sort of structured around capturing people instead of killing people and less about taking territory in that sense. And so, but one of the things that meant is that they used to use these human sacrifices to sort of project geopolitical power because it would basically be like, look, I captured all your people and then I sacrificed them all. What are you going to do about it? That kind of thing. But it was like nobody denies that human sacrifice played a large role in Mexican stuff. But the Spanish, when they conquered them, used depictions of these sacrifices as a way to talk about how barbaric these people were. And
they sort of played it up and sort of made it seem more sinister than it probably was.
And it's the part of like when you study a group like that existed in the 1500s, you need to put on a sense of moral relativism. Like, I'm not going to come up here and say, I don't want to get hashtag canceled, so I'm not going to say that I'm pro-human sacrifice. But what I will say...
I've never done one.
I've never done
just for the record, I've never done one.
Yeah, me neither. But what I will say is that if you want to understand a civilization that practices human sacrifice, you have to understand it on its own terms, and you can't just apply a completely alien culture's ideas to it.
Right.
Especially when you understand that like their idea of the cosmology of the world and everything like that. It gets a lot more complicated. Anyways, instead, Graham Hancock's novels apparently just wade into like, oh, look how gross and evil this is. And it's like, yes.
It's yucky. Look how yucky it is. I'm right, guys? I'm right, says Graham Hancock.
Yeah. But then he decided to come back in 2015 with a book called Magicians of the Gods, the forgotten wisdom of Earth's lost civilization. So,
okay, hold on now. We had chariots of the gods, and then we had fingerprints of the gods, and now we have magicians of the gods. What does that mean? Magicians. The gods had magicians. They were big fans, and they had their own personal magicians with them. Am I close?
I think that this has to do with the people who were spreading the wealth of Atlantis to all of these civilizations that then people would say and attribute to the gods. Okay. So, the Atlanteans come down to Mexico and teach the primitive Mexicans to move big rock. And in doing so, in their myths, they would say that these people are like magical or they're like, messengers of the gods or whatever.
Gotcha.
So,
all right.
This is essentially a sequel to Fingerprints of the Gods. Came out for its 20th anniversary, and it's built on the premise that it's still building on Hancock's whole thing about there being a lost civilization in prehistory that was destroyed in a global catastrophe.
Of course. Yes.
The main thing, though, is that he introduces a new aspect to this, which is that he talks about a thing called the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, which is a sort of fringe hypothesis in geology about what caused the Younger Dryas period, which was this period near the end of the Ice Age, the last Ice Age, where things got a lot colder for a little while before it got warmed up again. And the general theory about what happened is that there was a place called Lake Agassiz, which was this massive lake in what would be modern day Manitoba.
All right.
So for in Canada, it'd be like sort of north of the Dakotas, kind of.
Gotcha. It sounded Canadian.
It is, yeah. And what happened is that the temperatures started warming up a little bit towards the end of the Ice Age, and that led to a bunch of a lot of Canada and like the prairies. The reason why the prairies are so flat is because they were covered in glaciers at this point. And enough of the glaciers melted so that almost like a dam breaking, like 15 or over 10,000 cubic kilometers of water went from this lake into the ocean. And what that did was like rapidly desalinate the oceans. So basically introduced a whole bunch of fresh water into the oceans, which then caused a change to the flow patterns of the ocean and led to a very cold, very dry period for a while. And this is responsible for killing a lot of the Ice Age animals that you probably know of. Like this is the thing that was the sort of end period of the Pleistocene.
That's sad. I'm sorry. I mean, I didn't have anything to do with it, but I'll still apologize.
But that's how geologists think about it. According to Graham Hancock and the people
what's Graham Boy think about it, though? Well, what is his vibe on it?
He taps into this fringe hypothesis that the Younger Dryas wasn't created by this sort of change, but it was actually created by a asteroid that impacted the Earth. That's
much cooler.
Yeah.
Much cooler. Where would it impact that?
They say that it broke up.
Also Manitoba. No.
It broke up and landed in several places. And apparently, coincidentally, it landed in places that were just right to destroy all evidence of that previous civilization.
Oh, that's right. The asteroids got our homework again.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So that was the sort of the thing. And then, sea level rise as a result and blah, blah, blah.
Blah, 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 blah. Dang. They got us. Well, there's no way not to there's no way to unprove it, right? Mm-hmm. So
yeah,
I guess he's onto something.
So in this book, though, he gets into sites like Göbekli Tepe, which is a extremely fascinating site in Turkey that might be like some of the oldest buildings we've ever found. It's a megalith that was made almost 7,000 years before the pyramids.
Oh wow!
The
pyramids are old.
Yeah, it's a temple or some sort of stone complex that was built by people who had not yet discovered farming. So it's preposterously old.
We got to do an episode about that. I bet
we probably will.
Alien stuff. Yeah.
I talked about it a bit in Ancient Apocalypse, but I imagine that they get there at some point. But they also talk about Baalbek, the Great Sphinx, the pyramids of Giza, and basically he goes between saying that they're either a lot older than archaeologists seem to think, and that they're from this ancient civilization, or that they were inspired by these ancient civilizations and therefore didn't make it themselves. A lot of academic reviewers have read this book and pointed out that Hancock makes a lot of factual errors and does a lot of selective use of evidence, and logical fallacies are found in the page of this book.
You don't say.
Yeah, I've got one review from an author by the name of a skeptic author by the name of Jason Colavito, who said it's, quote, not a good book by either the standards of entertainment or science. Describing it as derivative of previous works of catastrophist pseudo-archaeology and saying that it showed, quote, Hancock at his worst, angry, petulant, and slipshod.
Wow.
So
that's a good SAT word.
Yeah. So despite him being, this being full of factual errors and a lot of problems, 7 years after its release, it becomes the primary basis for Ancient Apocalypse.
Okay.
Ancient Apocalypse is mostly an adaptation of this and his next book, which I'll get to in a second.
So this was bad. Let's make a TV show about it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool.
The next one is a book called America Before: The Key to Earth's Lost Civilization.
He's in a lost civilization thing. Yeah. Well, I guess he's always been that way, right? Wasn't it one of his first ones about lost civilization?
Yeah, that's his big work in life.
Yeah, evidence of Earth's lost civilization, the origins of the quest for the lost civilization. Wow, it's got quest and lost civilization there in Heaven's Mirror. This is our boy back to form.
Yeah,
Earth's lost civilization.
I guess the novels didn't work out for him.
No.
But America Before has. I'll start with a review that I liked a lot, which, as a geologist who is personally familiar with some of the places and people Graham references, I can say the man is both a liar or an idiot.
He's a liar or an idiot.
So I've also seen it described as a carefully picked set of genuine scientific notions mixed with a few pseudo-archaeological ideas, like similarities between the Egyptian and Native American cultures, to set up Hancock for his final pitch, one that he holds back until he thinks he's won over the lay reader. His easy-to-read writing style makes the reader comfortable and probably sympathetic to him personally. He carefully poisons the well here and there with "the skeptics will say," etc., which to viewers of this show or listeners of this show and viewers of Ancient Aliens will probably know that that's a common tactic.
Yeah, mainstream archaeologists say this, but millions of people around the world think it's this other thing.
But the thing is that his conclusion can't be tested by science because it isn't within the realm of science.
So what's he claiming about in this one?
Basically, it's Magicians of the Gods, but in America.
Oh, okay.
With sites like the Serpent Mound and Poverty Point and stuff like that.
Okay, so it's the American version. He was like, remember the hit show The Office? Let's make the American version. It's gonna be even better.
Exactly. There is a part that he does talk about that doesn't get that in his conclusion he gets to only after he's really sold you, and that is that there's an advanced civilization evolving in North America during the Ice Age that, quote, transcended leverage and mechanical advantage and learned to manipulate matter and energy by deploying powers of consciousness that we have not yet begun to tap. Where do you think those powers of consciousness came from?
Oh, I have an idea. A little Lucy the Sky with Diamonds.
Well, this is where he's trying to pull his definitely not a racist card in 2019 with this book, saying that actually the super advanced civilization was in the Americas and were the ancestors of indigenous people. And they became so advanced because they did enough drugs that they learned all of the secrets of how to move, like basically ESP.
They did drugs enough to move to move stuff with their minds.
Mm-hmm. So basically this lost civilization used telepathy, remote viewing, telekinesis, and healing powers to transmit their legacy to the world.
That's pretty cool.
It's weird that part didn't make it into the documentary at all.
Do you think that's how Matilda does it?
Yes, she is an ancient Atlantean.
I've always suspected as such. That makes sense to me.
Oh man, the Trunch Bowl being the entire field of like mainstream archaeology, and Miss Honey being Graham Hancock. All right, folks. You know that I have driven myself half mad delving the internet for answers to the most wild of conspiracy theories, right? But here's something that's absolutely not debunkable. Your online privacy is more important than ever. That's why I use NordVPN. But wait, this isn't your ordinary VPN. With just a single click, I can stay safe from Eric Von Daniken, malware, while traveling virtually through time and space, all without missing my favorite content. Talk about staying grounded, huh? So listen up. Go to nordvpn.com/probablyNotAliens and get an exclusive NordVPN deal. It's risk-free with their 30-day money-back guarantee. Plus, every purchase of a 2-year plan gets you 4 bonus months. Can you believe that? Protect yourself from online threats while you're out there debunking ancient aliens. Wait, don't do that. No, that's me. I do that. You listen to the show. Don't move in on my turf. If you move in on my turf, I swear to God. Anyways, don't wait. Get NordVPN now.
I don't even know where to go from here. This is all just, it feels, because I'm going to guess, was he also trying to say that these ancient people were white? Did he say that part?
This part he didn't. This part he was definitely trying to say, look how not racist I am. I'm now saying that the Atlanteans were Native Americans.
All right. Well, that's something, I guess.
Yeah, 2019, better late than never, I guess. But apparently, like, I have one little bit review that I think sums up the feeling the best, which is, I wondered throughout the entire book what mechanism he would suggest. I honestly thought it would be the power of oral history, perhaps tied to mnemonic devices, figurines, rock art landscapes, or religious ritual to ensure fidelity. I was not expecting ESP.
Like, yeah, there's like, it would be so much more interesting, I think, to be like, yeah, all of the, like, the culture itself and like, yeah, the oral history and things like that. And it's like, no, dude, they had big brain powers. They were all Professor X back in the day.
Mm-hmm. So then,
because of drugs.
Yep. And that brings us to 2022's Netflix documentary Ancient Apocalypse, which is basically a rehash of those last 2 books and features a lot of Joe Rogan. Because I don't know if I mentioned this, but he goes on Joe Rogan a lot. And Joe Rogan really likes a lot of these ideas. And you know how Joe Rogan kind of loves hallucinogens, so this kind of fits.
He sure does. Joe Rogan, man.
Yeah.
So good. What a good boy.
What a person who is doing good things for this society.
He's only good things and never anything bad or questionable, this guy.
But yeah, kind of to dig into it a little
From
bit.
Fear Factor? That Joe Rogan? He's got a podcast?
Oh, yeah. Oh, boy.
What?
Boy has
this is
new
news
stuff
to
happened.
me. I gotta listen to it. I bet I'm gonna love it.
Oh man, I knew a guy who liked the Joe Rogan Experience, and it didn't take very long to go from that into what's wrong with being proud of being white in a surprisingly short period of time. And I was like, I have to go now.
Whoops.
Yeah.
Whoops.
So to kind of step back a little bit and think about this, like,
that's the name of your channel.
why am I being such an angry person at this one guy? Well, not only is he wrong, which is apparently a thing I cannot abide, but the thing is that this ancient civilization thing does tap into a lot of white supremacist and racist philosophies that come from the 19th century and is built primarily upon the idea that people who were not European could not possibly have done all of these amazing things. Does this not sound familiar for everybody here? The series that he does has a lot of stuff where he interviews people with selective editing, like Jeffrey McCafferty, who is a expert on the site of Cholula, who he interviews and has some extremely carefully cut sections to make it sound like this mainstream archaeologist agrees with him, and has like now gone to the record about how he's been deceptively edited, and like several people who've been on Ancient Apocalypse, all the people who basically were experts he talked to have had to like talk about like how they were tricked into doing this documentary and led into it under false pretenses and etc. Not a great move for, but then he does have some people on, like Marco Vigato, who is another Atlantis writer. He wrote a book about Atlantis a while back that I was basically Vigato's body of work in a book called The Empires of Atlantis has been described as one of the most white supremacist racist books that they've ever seen, with the primary project of trying to make the case that the roots of civilization are in Atlantis and not Africa.
And they're all white, I imagine, in Atlantis. Yeah.
And so in many ways, like the way that he talks, now maybe this 2019 book exonerates him in some capacity, but in many ways, he does a lot of what Donald Trump does, where he comes right up to the edge of saying the thing, just enough that the people who know what he's talking about will take it as like, oh, he's talking to us.
Yeah.
But the people who don't will be like, we'll not get it, or he'll be able to dismiss it as him just asking questions, or it's just a joke, or whatever.
Sort of like a dog whistle sort of a thing.
Yeah. And furthermore, Graham Hancock's been embraced by the internet culture wars. So this is going to get a lot more normal.
Cool.
Ancient Apocalypse is sort of in the same vein as people like Joe Rogan or Tucker Carlson, the intellectual dark web, where he has referred to him as being, he has like done stuff like retweeted positively stuff from Matt Walsh.
Oh boy.
He's done stuff like refer to the academics who criticize him as woke, and has on the Joe Rogan podcast say how he's being canceled for his talks.
Okay. So this is the thing. Everything that we've been talking about Graham Hancock with so far, I just thought he was a person with bad ideas, but he was just so committed to those bad ideas that he was just like, I don't know, whatever. But now he's like just he's like saying all of the words. He's saying all of the buzzwords that people want to hear from him, and like, oh, I've been canceled by the woke mob or whatever. And it's like, all right, now you are definitely not just like you're not just like a weirdo with bad ideas. You are like actively trying. It feels like you're actively trying to harm people now.
I think if anything, he's trying to use the right wing reactionary sphere who he has surrounded himself with to basically take his side in this argument that this fight he's been trying to have for decades. And given that we've sort of collectively lost connection with reality, it seems to work really well. So, and I'll just mention before we go, to kind of fit into where he fits into the greater sphere, one of his biggest fans who made a video talking about how great he is, you can't find this video anymore because the guy's name is Jake Angeli, who you might know more through his media nickname of the QAnon Shaman. So... Yeah.
That's no good.
And I would say that also this is like, in many ways, I would also say that Ancient Apocalypse is actually kind of mild. and that Ancient Aliens, which we'll probably talk to in the time to come, is a lot worse because Ancient Aliens does actually have people like Tucker Carlson come on as guests and write some weird episodes where they're weirdly pro-Russia and stuff like that. So, we've got a whole lot of fun stuff coming up in the future. But if you want to get one clue, like Ancient Aliens and Ancient Apocalypse and a lot of this stuff is actually very popular with like your conservative Fox News watching reactionary types.
Your aunts and uncles and such.
Yeah. And I think that there's something to be said about like everybody felt so shocked and appalled in 2016 when like the collective American right like lost its connection with reality and now are just buying into any conspiracy theory they can find and don't seem to have any sort of way to build coherent thoughts anymore, to the point where I think that in many ways the election last year in the US, the Republicans seem to like not perform as well as they did because they just got so wrapped up in weird culture war stuff that they sort of alienated a lot of people. That and the fact that just so many conservatives died of COVID for some mysterious reason. But I think, though, that there has something to say about that. There's been this very easy to make, cheap content like Ancient Aliens, like Ancient Apocalypse, that has been proliferating on basic cable for years on channels that are supposed to have reputations for being scientific and educational, like Discovery and Science and History and such. And I think that has played a role in the collective, like, just like if you buy into, like, I always point out that like one of the number one signs that someone will believe in a conspiracy theory is if they already believe in another conspiracy theory. Like it's onboarding people into these weird esoteric spaces that I've mentioned several times have connections to the far right. And I think that this part of the radicalization process through basic cable doesn't get talked about as much because, fancy upper middle class journalists don't watch basic cable. They don't really know like what the uncles and aunts are watching every night on TV. They think they saw everything through the lens of like social media and Twitter because that's the way they saw things, when that's not how most people interact with media.
Yeah. You're losing touch with I guess how people are actually being exposed to this sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm. And in doing so, and in many ways, I think there's something a bit hypocritical where a lot of the reaction only came out when it was for Ancient Apocalypse. Why? Because Ancient Apocalypse was on Netflix, which is a thing that the upper middle class sort of journalistic class will actually watch.
Yeah, because it's also where they have Great British Bake Off.
Exactly. Like the thing is, like shit being on History Channel or the Science Channel or Discovery Channel doesn't matter to people who don't really watch those types of television. But when it comes for their Netflix, for like, when they start seeing Ancient Apocalypse on the splash screen before they open up Stranger Things,
right?
That's all of a sudden when it matters. When this is a thing that has been poisoning our society for decades at this point without anybody really drawing much attention to it.
I mean, even just the show Ancient Aliens, as we've talked about before, has been on for, almost 20 years, it feels like.
Yeah, I think it's on season 16 right now.
So, and I'm sure at that point it just becomes noise, right? And so having something like now Netflix is like, here's a similar thing, but now it's in a place, it's in a new format, new place.
Yeah.
Suddenly people are paying attention to it, which is good. That I'm glad people are paying attention to it in regard, like in trying to do the stuff that we've been doing, which is like looking into it, debunking it, talking about the context behind the people who've made it and things like that. But I think it's there's no shortage of this stuff that's out there that's besides Ancient Apocalypse that people are going to continue to watch anyway. And
it makes things make sense. Like you and I were on a Jose video last year that was talking about the fact that Tucker Carlson had made a streaming documentary about freaking UFOs.
Yeah.
And like this connection is one that doesn't get explored much, but I think that there's a lot to it. Furthermore, the other thing too, and this is another like kind of bugbear about me with Ancient Apocalypse specifically, is that Hancock has a very special hatred of the field of archaeology. And archaeology is a field that is not very well funded by the universities that have them. So they very often rely on public interest and trust to get the money that they need to do their proper work and excavations that they do to do things properly, because archaeology is expensive to do. And they need media attention and public knowledge to really survive, to get grant funding and to do digs. And poisoning that relationship is going to directly hurt the field, because people who might have an interest in something like archaeology are now going to start believing that there's some grand conspiracy of archaeologists who are trying to take down the truth about the world or whatever.
Right. And that's not going to make anything better, right? Like at that point, we're only going to get more conspiracy theories and we're not actually going to get any kind of real research done.
Yeah.
You know?
I got one last fun fact about the explanation for this that I think is interesting.
Well, cool. Because I have one final fun fact about Graham Hancock's horoscope. So we could close out here with these things.
Well, okay. So Netflix has been sort of in crosshairs lately for a lot of different reasons. Like Ancient Apocalypse has been on Netflix, but also like we were talking, like I think you could talk about how they did Dave Chappelle specials and
they sure did.
All sorts of stuff that has been really questionable lately, which is really weird because Netflix had like the first prominent like trans television star that really was whose like stardom was considered like the turning point on trans rights, and somehow has degenerated to this. But if you wanted to bring this up, this is the final fun fact. If you wanted to bring up complaints about this kind of stuff, like Ancient Apocalypse being on Netflix, you can talk to a specific person. It is the president of Unscripted Originals who works at Netflix, whose name is Sean.
Okay.
Sean Hancock.
No.
Who happens
They're not
to...
They're not related, though.
Sean Hancock, a.k.a. Graham Hancock's son.
No! No! You... What?
Yeah, the president of Unscripted Originals on Netflix is Graham Hancock's son.
Tristan, I cannot believe you held that in for so... What? Unbelievable. I am like peeking my microphone. I'm so flabbergasted at that reveal that you are the magicians to the gods with that prestige. Oh my God.
So Sean Hancock, aka the actual son of Graham Hancock, is in charge of making the documentaries. So if you're surprised why something weird like Ancient Apocalypse showed up on Netflix out of nowhere, this may be a reason why.
Don't be surprised. Oh, that's much better than what I was going to say about his horoscope.
He's a Nepo dad.
He's a Nepo dad. I was in classic horoscope fashion. I was Googling to see if there was any other interpretation of Leo that would fit Graham Hancock better. You know, just trying to find the thing that fits and disregarding everything that doesn't fit. And I found that Leos, in regard to their career, money, and success traits, they bring a fiery intensity to everything they do, including work. And when they believe in what they're doing, there's no stopping them. And I think that is pretty much Graham Hancock.
Yep.
He believes what he's doing, and there is no stopping this person, sadly.
So on that fun note, hey, do you want to listen to more? If you heard that and were like, hey, I want more of this podcast, you can tell us all of your Grahamcock theories and memes and fan arts to @PropsNotAliens on Twitter.
Yeah, tell us that. Also, if you haven't seen Tristan's video, his magnum opus about Ancient Apocalypse.
If this is my magnum opus, I'm going to be very disappointed in myself.
What if it's just an opus, not the magnum opus? How's that?
Yeah, this work of my unhinged, insane, like, need to correct somebody who's been wrong on the internet, that turned into a 2-hour mega video.
It is comprehensive. Then go check that out at stepbackhistory.com.
And Scott, if I wanted to explore nerd culture through curiosity and vulnerability,
that's me.
Where would I find that very specific combination of things?
Oh, you can do that. That's my channel, Nerdsync, Nerdsync. I'm making videos again, hopefully. By the time you listen to this, I should have made at least 1 or 2 videos. So I'm back at it. I'm doing quick videos covering there's a lot of weird news that's been happening lately, especially around Scooby-Doo. So
This is
Listen
Scooby-Doo
to that.
having a weird one right now.
Scooby-Doo's having a weird one right now. Thank you to everyone for writing reviews of this show. I've been getting notifications about more and more reviews. I get notifications anytime someone writes a review. So if you want to fill my inbox with good things, please write a review of the show. It really helps us out. And you can also tell your friends about this show because that's a fantastic way to spread it around, keep us growing, and get this information out there. Like the fact that Graham Hancock is directly related to someone who works at a high up job at Netflix. What a weird thing that I learned today. And the best place you can send people is a very simple website, probsnotaliens.com.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess that's it, right? Until next time, my name is Scott Nicewander.
I'm Tristan Johnson, and the truth is out there. Probably. I don't even know what I was doing with that one.
Probably. It was almost like it's like a sing-songy probably. Like if we had a probably superhero, that would be their catchphrase.
Probably.
Probably.